You good? Hey, Adrian asked me for oh yeah. And like on Friday I was like, oh shit.
It's the big silver button in the back.
Yeah, I'm trying to.
Welcome everybody. Justin, are we going? Okay. A couple of seats up front for the people who showed up late. Jim? It's like church if you don't show up on time. Sure for my cord. Oh yeah, you're good. All right, well welcome. Thank you for coming tonight. Who's excited that we have a new location? Because I don't think at the office we could have fit 70 people in there. So, last month we had a really good meeting, and a lot of you guys were encouraged to go out and get something done this month. Who did something between last meeting and this meeting? Bought something, closed on something, kicked a tenant out, went on something. Al did like 10 things last time. Someone has to take his place since he's not here. Anyone buy anything? Let's back up. Anyone put an offer in on a house in the last 30 days? All right, so we have like 5 people. Any of those offers accepted?
No one.
What'd you get?
We got a contract right now, we're in negotiations.
Okay.
Was that inspected last week?
Is that house you're keeping as a rental, flipping? Flip, okay. Awesome, what town?
Lake Village.
Okay. Anyone sell anything? We got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, we sold them. We did a land contract last Monday.
Okay. Was that one of your tax sale houses? Are you buying anything at this coming tax sale? There you go. Who's going to the tax sale in like 2-3 weeks? Couple of people? Cool. Alright, so our group, we started this last year, and the whole goal was just to bring together investors of all different levels, investors that have done no deals but want to learn, to investors that have done hundreds of thousands of dollars in deals a year. Bring everyone together to provide a relevant, an environment for relevant real estate investment education, as well as a place to grow your personal network. I know for me personally, last year, a lot of people in this room, I was able to sell them houses. I lent them money, they lent us money, referred contractors to them, got contractors referred. So just by having a big network of people, it made what I do on a day-to-day basis a whole lot easier. So a couple of benefits of being part of our group is, again, just the networking with experienced investors. I had lunch with someone last week and we talked a lot about wholesaling and how to find off-market deals. I get people that call me all the time, hey, analyze this flip, help me with this rental. Education through the monthly speakers. Get connected. We have lawyers that are part of the group, contractors, accountants, landlords. Get deals done. There's been lots of people in this group that have sold houses, bought houses, lent money, wholesaled houses in this group. And then I just add this, and we'll get into this more later, but vendor discounts. We've been talking with a lot of local companies that provide services to investors. And we're going to bring some vendors in, and they're going to provide value to you, whether that's discounted services or other benefits to you guys. So, real quick on the legal side, the material and content presented today is for educational purposes only. Outside of tonight's meeting, it's not legal advice. Don't take it as such. The content presented is a recollection of the speaker's personal experiences, their success and or failure. Don't go consult with your own professionals prior to engaging in any activities, and the success of the speaker is not a guarantee that you will be successful. A lot of the speakers that present here, especially when we do our success stories, you see the good, and a lot of times I ask them to present the bad too, to give you a realistic idea of what they go through. Those TV shows, everyone's seen a flipping show, right? That stuff's all made for TV. It only gives you the good stuff. If it was realistic, nobody would really want to flip, because there are a few headaches with flipping. And But a lot of our speakers, they've been doing this a while, so they've experienced those headaches. So just because they're going to present on something that went well, doesn't mean they have the magic touch. It just means that they've learned from other people's failures, and you'll probably have some failure as well. So we do record all of the videos. Here's a list of the videos that we do have. If you are a member of the group, all of those videos are free. Just email group@investnwi. And when you email us the month and the topic on what you want, and we'll send you a link for that video. If you are not a member and you want some of the past videos, they're $10 a piece. If you want 3, we'll do $25 for all 3. And again, just email us. These videos are phenomenal. Even like mobile home park investing. Who was here last month? Are any of you guys going to go out and buy a mobile home park? I'm not. I was here last month. It's not something I get excited about. But there was still a lot of valuable information about how his mindset, how he analyzes deals, things that he'd look at, that I can apply in things that I'm interested in. So even if a topic isn't necessarily something you definitely want to do, there's going to be nuggets in there that the speakers are going to share that are going to apply to your full-time job, investing, all sorts of other things. So group@investnwi, if you're interested in any of those, just email us there and we will get those out to you. A couple of useful tools. If you are on Facebook, you want to go and find Invest NWI Investor Group. It's a group page. It is a closed page, so I have to approve you to get in there. And the reason why we close it is there's other investor group pages where they're open to everybody, and you just get a lot of spam junk. You get these fake lenders that will have a Gmail account and they lend thousands and millions of dollars, but they don't even have like a legitimate website or anything like that. So we're trying to keep out the bad people in the group, so the people that are in the group are legitimate. But this is a good place where we announce all of our upcoming speakers. We put the video out about our upcoming events. You can post your deals. If you're looking at buying something, you don't have to necessarily post the address, but if you just want someone to be like, hey, here's what I'm thinking of paying for, here's my rehab, what's your thoughts on whether or not this is a good deal? Especially now because margins are getting tight, deals are getting harder to find. A lot of investors are tightening their margins. Post it on there, get some feedback. You want that feedback before you buy it, because if you buy it and you pay too much, nothing you can do about it at that point. A good place to ask other related questions. We have people ask about rental issues, evicting people, inheriting tenants, and we'll talk a lot about that tonight, but that's a good place to ask questions about that. A couple of the goals that we have for the group this coming year is, one, I want to have a dedicated website. So we're meeting with someone tomorrow that's going to have a dedicated website. You don't have to go to our wholesaling website and then find the tab for the group. It'll be specific for the group. We'll have a calendar of events. I have a lot of people that call me, especially the day of. Hey, where are we meeting? What's the speaker? What's the time? You know, all these questions that really, if they just go to a website, they'll be able to find out. We're going to have a member area, and in the member area, we're going to have the vendor information. A lot of the vendors, again, are going to have perks for the members, discounts, so we'll have the information on that, on how to get that from them. We're going to have a section for member contact information. I get calls and texts all the time, hey, I want to connect with so-and-so, what's their email, what's their phone number? So again, this is just a way to make it easier for you to get that information. If you are an existing member, we'll reach out to you this week because you're going to opt into that. If you don't want your contact information on the website, that's fine. If you are not a member on the new applications, there's a section where you can check yes. I would encourage you to check that. That's only available to members, and that will allow other people to contact you, reach out to you if maybe there's a deal they have for you, or you can help them, or vice versa. We're going to have a contact list. And this list is something that you guys are going to put together. It's going to be the vendors, the contractors, the local companies that you've used, their services, and your experience with them. If you've used a property manager and you didn't like them for ABC, then we'll have like a rating system up there. It's not going to be an opportunity to just completely bash people, but just leave actual constructive criticism on them. Same with a contractor. You know, I get people all the time, hey, I'm looking for a good plumber. but we'll have a list of plumbers that you guys have used, kind of like an Angie's list, just not as good as that. And then also, it'll be the video, so you'll just be able to click on all the past videos. You won't have to email us or anything like that. And then we'll have a non-member section, and this will have some of the information, but mainly it'll have the area for the video. So if there's a meeting that you miss, instead of having to email us and collect payment through, bringing in the money or paying over the phone, you'll just be able to click on the video, buy it right there, and be able to watch it there. So that's one of the big things that we're working on. We're actually meeting with a website developer tomorrow to start working on that. Second thing that we're working on is better video equipment. I got that camera 2 years ago when I was having a baby because the person thought everyone uses a camcorder nowadays. So it literally sat in a box for 2 years and I never used it until I got this. It's adequate, but it's not the best quality video. If you've watched the videos, you'll see that one of the big issues that we're having is the screen's really, really bright. I'm in a dark place and you can't see the words on the screen and see me. So you're either going to see me and this is going to be super, super bright, or I'm going to be dark and you'll be able to see the screen. Obviously with better video equipment, someone that knows how to do that stuff, that will make the videos a lot better for you guys to enjoy and get more out of when you're watching it. So those are the two biggest things that we're working on this year, in addition to keeping good speakers that are relevant. So because of that, our costs have skyrocketed. If you guys were with us last year, we met across the street in our office. We could fit about 35 to 40 comfortably. And if you looked at our financials at the end of the year, we actually broke even. That $10 that came in pretty much covered the food and the projector screen and stuff like that. Well, this year, now that we're renting space, we have more people, more food, these things, for every $10 that we bring in, and most of you guys are new, so you didn't pay at all tonight, but we average spending about $7 a person every night. So out of that $10 that paid, and who paid tonight? Not a whole lot. So I'm guessing when I look at the books in the morning, the 70 or 80 that we collected tonight doesn't even cover the food. So because of that, we're going to bring in vendors, and if you're interested in being a vendor, I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail about what they can do, but you can contact me. The purpose of the vendors are, one, to help offset the cost so we don't have to raise the price on you guys, but they're also going to add value to the group. We have Home Depot tonight. He's going to come up and talk a little bit about their programs. I've talked with Sherwin-Williams about being a vendor in the group, and they've already got us discounts on paint. A lot of their discounts are you're talking $12, $15 a gallon, which is phenomenal for high quality paint. So we have other vendors that we're working with. I'm going to reach out to some property management companies, contractors, cabinet folks. So the whole idea, a couple other ones, insurance. And if you have any vendors that you want to see in the group or the idea, just email us and we'll reach out to them. But they're going to provide value to you guys, whether it's exceptional service, discounts. So we're working on that. So our first vendor is Mitch. He's with Home Depot. Who has one of the Home Depot Pro accounts? Just a handful. If you do any sort of, come on up, if you do any sort of flipping, rentals, it's worth the account, and he'll talk about it. I don't think I paid anything for my account, but sometimes I get free gas, I get other perks, and Mitch will go into some of those details.
So thank you. My name is Mitch. I work at the Schererville Home Depot store. I'm the supervisor over the pro contractors area. A lot of times I know we have some investors and some flippers in here. Home Depot just refers to them as a pro. So if you ever hear me say pro, if you're ever in a Home Depot and you hear the word pro, that's most time referring to you guys who walk in. This is what you do on a daily basis. And so like he said, we have the Pro Extra program. The best way I could describe that, it's completely free, but imagine the Speedy Rewards program for Home Depot. Only it's like a Speedy Rewards on steroids, right? So we do a couple things with that. We call it Pro Extra, and we do a couple things with it. The first thing that does for you is it tracks all your purchases. So when you check out at a register, if you're registered with that Pro Extra, you put in your phone number, or you already have a credit card or a debit card, whatever you normally use for your business is already registered to that account. So every time you swipe, every time you put in your phone number, that receipt automatically goes to your account. So come, February, January, whenever you're about to do your taxes, you can look back and you have all your receipts. That also helps you when 6 months down the road you have 10 boxes of tile at a house, you have no idea where it came from. I might have bought this, I might not have. You can bring it into the store, we can scan it, it'll go through all those receipts for you automatically. Bing, bang, boom, you get your money back for your 10 cases of tile, you can take that right out, purchase something else for another house, right? So that purchase tracking is the first thing that really helps you out. Next thing you have is what we call business tools, right? Business tools is kind of what he referred to as kind of like discounts. So the first one, the big one that Home Depot offers to you pros is an automatic discount on Behr paints. Behr paint is what Home Depot is like married to. There are certain companies that Home Depot is exclusive to, and Behr is one of those. Behr is one of our better paints. You know, it's one of the only ones that we really care, we really push. You'll see a lot of it there. As you spend more money with your Pro Extra account there, you get more discounts. So if you spend like $7,500 or more on paint a year, you're gonna get 20% off of anything. You know, just automatic. Every time you walk into the store, you pick up a gallon of paint, you put your number in, right at the register. You never need to see anybody. You can come in on a Saturday night at 9:58. Right before we close, you put in your phone number. It'll take that discount off the paint automatically. And having that Pro Extra is what gets you that, right? So you have the, I said the purchase tracking, the business tools, the paint rewards, and Home Depot recently rolled out a really cool program that I really like, especially for the investors and the flippers who don't come into the store every day because you're buying materials but you're sending a contractor in, is what Home Depot calls text to confirm. So as you have that registered credit card, that registered debit card onto your account, you can sign up for text to confirm, meaning that when somebody comes into the store, you send in any Tom, Dick, and Harry, and he's going to pick up your tile, pick up your, your paint, it'll send a text to your phone that says, hey, Tom's in the store, he's here to purchase paint, it's $20. Would you like to pay for this? You just hit 1, you reply, it goes right back to my system, charges the card, you never need to pick up a phone, you don't need to be in the store. All through having that Pro Extra, and that's really big too. The other thing that comes with that Pro Extra is saving that money is on what, a lot of times if you've ever worked in Home Depot and you ever done like a big flip or something like that, you'll hear what's called the bid room, right? And I know some of you guys in here, you guys work at Home Depot, I actually recognize some of your faces. That bid room is where you save the money. Any purchase over $1,500, if you're what's called a non-managed account, and if you're a managed account, normally you're spending $120,000 to $150,000 a year in Home Depot materials. But if you're under that, it's $1,500, and that $1,500 puts you into what we call the bid room, or the volume pricing program, right? So let's say you're spending $1,500 on hardwood flooring. I put that information into my program, and it examines how much Home Depot's paying for it, and how much we marked it up at. And it tries to meet you at the middle. So sometimes, like my boards, my drywall, I don't have a lot of markup on. You guys are paying pretty much what I'm paying for. It's just already a good deal. But some things like hardwood flooring, carpet, other things like that, you can save 20, 30, 40% just by walking in the door and hitting that $1,500 threshold. That's big. I mean, that's huge. And after you get in that bid room, that volume pricing program, that stays open for 7 days on any purchase you make. So if you make one $1,500 purchase on a Monday, come Wednesday, you can walk in with a $20 order and we'll put it in the bid room for you, and that'll help save you money. And that all comes when you enroll in that Pro Extra program. The last thing I wanted to talk about was actually 2 more things. A lot of people don't understand, but Home Depot will match Menards 11% rebates. We have a whole website dedicated to it. That 11% rebate is what gets a lot of people to go to Menards, and I hear a lot of you pros say, I like the customer service at Home Depot, I like the products you carry, but every 4 or 5 weeks Menards runs the 11%, and I just can't find it anywhere else. Home Depot will match that. Every single time you make a purchase, and Menards is running that, you keep your receipt, you go on to homedepot.com/rebates, 11% rebate center. You can find it just by Googling, it'll pull it right up. You put in your receipt information, 11% off, and that's for anybody. That means if you walk in the store tonight, Menards is actually running it this week, and you go buy 3 gallons of paint, you can get the 11% off. But we'll help you with the pros, making sure a lot of times what we do is we call you guys every week, hey, Menards is running the 11%, anything you want us to do for you, and you can stack those discounts. So you can go through the bid room, get your 10, 15, 20, 40% off your order, then take that order and put it through the 11% rebate and get a gift card in about 4 weeks back to Home Depot. That's 11% of that purchase. And the last thing I wanted to mention too that's available a lot of times at Home Depot is, I know Justin mentioned, a lot of you guys work are part of other investor groups, National Realty and Real Estate Investment, the CCIA, which is like Chicago Creative Investors Association, things like that. As you spend more money at a Home Depot or a retailer that's associated with those investors organizations, you get the opportunity to just get an automatic rebate. Meaning, if you enroll with these investors associates, and a lot of times it's a $100 a year, $50 a year, something like that, and you work with me and you spend over, normally the threshold for those associations is like $50,000 or so a year at a participating, you know, location, a Home Depot, different places they have already approved with, you get like a 2% rebate. And you get that all year long, every single half. So every 6 months you get a check back that says, hey, here's 2% of what you spent at a Home Depot. And I have some flippers who spend, you know, last year they spent $360,000 at my store alone. 2% of that adds back to a lot of money just in the check they get every 6 months back to them. So come and talk to me in the back. I'd love to get to know some of you guys, get you guys set up with some of this. Some of it you gotta, you know, spend a little bit more money until you're available for. But a lot of times I tell a lot of my pros at my store, I treat the dollar pro as much, you know, as well as I treat the $1 million pro. And we can help you guys out, help you guys save a little bit of money. Come see me in the back when you guys are taking care of that.
Awesome.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Mitch will be hanging out after tonight, so go grab one of his brochures if you don't have the account. Mitch, how much does that account cost?
It's free.
Okay, so just sign up because you never know when you're going to need it. And we use the Pro Desk all the time, and their pricing at the Pro Desk is way better than what you see on the shelf most of the time. So we are moving towards a lot of new technology. It seems like everybody nowadays can produce some apps. I heard on the news the other day like 99% of apps are dead in like 6 months. But this is an app that's been around a while. You know, Justin's going to talk more about it, but it's great for people who own rentals and.
How is everybody? Good. Well, we are talking about rentals. That's why you guys are here. You probably don't want to hear me talk, so I'll make this quick here. We deal with, if you don't know me, I'm co-owners with Adrian on Region Home Buyers. We primarily wholesale properties to other investors like yourself. We are just buying and reselling rentals, flip properties. That's what we do. One of the biggest things that we come across is landlord buyers just simply don't know their numbers. They buy a property, and we ask them, you know, what are you looking to get? And when you buy a rental, and they'll say, well, if I buy it for $50,000, I get $1,000 a month. I'm doing good. Then 2 years from then, I'm buying it for pennies on the dollar to resell to somebody else who's smarter. So we always encourage our buyers to run the numbers, to look at the vacancy, the taxes, take it all into account. You know, you have two properties that are $50,000 side by side. One makes money, one doesn't. And so I haven't really found a whole lot of apps other than this one that's helpful. This one does have a free version. It's called Property Evaluator. This app is primarily only for rentals. You can see here, you can go to their website, kind of check it out. They do have a paid version, which I have, and it works real well. There's an actual picture of the app there. So when you have the app, you're going to be able to put in, you'll be able to add properties, how much you want to purchase it for, what you think the rental income might be. You know, maybe there's some other income, whether it's laundry or something else, some expenses, some improvements you need. If you're going to have a mortgage, what your debt service is going to be. And then once you go through that, you can add in, a lot of people don't think about, how much is insurance, how much are taxes, cleaning and maintenance. And then it'll also take into account appreciation, typical vacancy rates. You can adjust all of those. If you're looking to refinance, those sort of things, you can add expenses over here. It'll actually map the property. If you want to do that, you can keep track of a lot of things. And then if you go to property analysis, it'll actually spit out a bunch of things. So if you're wondering, hey, I don't really know how to figure out cash-on-cash return, is this a good deal, is it not a good deal? I don't know. You can look over here, it actually shows the cash-on-cash return over there. If you have a loan, it may show some of the loan details, taxes. It'll show a lot of different things that'll help you make a decision on the spot on if you want to make a rental, if it makes sense. Not just saying, hey, I want to pay $50,000, it's going to bring me $1,000 a month of rent. Does it truly make sense to buy this property? If you're using private lenders, this is helpful too, because you can actually, does everybody have one of these? So you can actually email this to a private lender if you're going to use a lender, show them where you came up with the numbers, why it's a good deal, maybe even a banker. And you can save this and print this. And on page 2, it'll break down, your equity with your debt service every year if you're not paying in, how much you've made in cash flow, those sort of things. So it's a good app. I don't know how much you can do in the free version versus the paid version, but it certainly wouldn't hurt to just check it out. Maybe try it on a few of your own rentals that you have already, and see how much money you're really making, and if it makes sense to keep it. If you're, I guess it does break it down. There you go. I don't get anything from it, so you guys can buy it or not buy it, but it is helpful if you guys are interested. Just you can look at it in the App Store. It's Property Evaluator, or check out their website too, realestatetools.com. They also have one for flipping too, so if you want to analyze a flip property, they have some stuff for that too.
One of the nice things about it is like Bigger Pockets has different calculators for that. But if you're out and you drive past the house, or you just looked at it with your agent or something like that, it's right there on your phone. Whereas with like Bigger Pockets, you had to go home to your computer. So it's a super easy app to use. So our success story tonight is Jack. Come on up. Jack bought a building in Hammond. About a month ago?
Yeah, January 5th.
Okay.
When it closed,
So he is going to talk about his success or lack of success. I'm not sure yet. If you want to be the speaker at one of these, you've done a flip or rental, email me, because I'm going to do what they do at church, and if I don't get anyone, I'm going to start calling people and making you do it. So even if you failed, if you completely failed, what people can learn from that is just as valuable, if not more valuable, than someone who had an HGTV type renovation.
All right, so for those of probably.
Just right those.
All right, so for those of y'all who I haven't met, I'm Jack Barco. He said maybe it's a success. I want to call it a success.
It's early.
But it is a little early to say for sure. So we'll see. Ask me in a year or something. But so just a little bit about me. I'm originally from Atlanta. I went to college at Georgia Tech. I studied chemical engineering. In school, most people didn't say that they typically don't have chemical plants in downtown parts of cities. So I traveled around a little bit after school. I lived in the middle of nowhere for about a year and a half. If you ever heard of Paducah, Kentucky, town about 20,000 people, nothing else by it. Oops. Oh man. I was able to save a lot of money, but as like a young single guy, I got incredibly bored. So I moved to Chicago last August for a job in East Chicago at a chemical plant here. Again, I thought I'd be working a little bit closer to downtown, and then I was like, oh, East Chicago is not in Illinois. But, it's a learning process, I guess. So, but my main plan is buy and holds. For whatever reason, I like multifamily, so that's what I want to stick with. Eventually, I would like either to only do investing or maybe quit my job and do something else that's less hours, lower stress, whatever. My 2018 goal is to buy 3 more properties, so we'll see if I get there or not. But so this is the property. I found out I was doing this presentation last Thursday, so I apologize. Like any of the exterior pictures are gonna have 2 feet of snow in them, so. But it is what it is. So it's a 4-plex, 4 1-bedroom apartments. They're all about 600 square feet. I found this on the MLS. I linked up with a realtor. He's got something where I kind of tell him my preferences, and anytime anything's added to the MLS, price changes on the MLS, I get an email if it matches my criteria. So, I think I got 5 emails on this property. If anybody was following this specific property, you probably noticed the listing agent kept dropping the price like $100 every 3 days or something. I was like, what is going on with this? Let me check it out. So, I looked at it and they were like, we don't want to show this property to anyone until we have an accepted offer. And I was like, well, that's kind of silly because there's no pictures of the inside. And so I just kind of was like, oh, it's probably like a gut job, I don't know. But, so I kind of put together an offer based on you know, assuming the best case scenario, and then of course you can get out of it with your inspection contingency clause. So I think originally I offered 90, and it was originally listed for 120. So I think they came down to, I think it was like 105 or something. We eventually settled on 95. And meanwhile, the whole time negotiating, they keep dropping the price on the MLS. So I'm like, somebody else is gonna come in and sweep it out from under my hands. So we settled at 95. I had the inspection. I paid $1,000. It's probably high, but I want to pay that again. But I got a good learning experience, so whatever. The inspector came back and said, hey, you know, the units look good, you know, everything's okay, but, you know, these 4 furnaces and they're over 30 years old, and, you know, they might be a safety concern. And then 2 of the hot water heaters were, he's like, yeah, they might break and leak anytime soon. So, you know, I was at the December meeting and I was talking with Justin and Adrian, and, you know, they came up with some really good points, you know. They accepted my offer. That's probably the highest offer they've gotten. Renegotiate. So we came back and said, hey, you know, there's all these furnaces I'm gonna have to replace. Let's do 85. And they said, you know, 92.5. And I was like, all right, well, we'll do 87. And they came down to 89.9. Could I have gotten it cheaper? Maybe, but at the same time, I wanted to get it to 90s, and I was okay with that. So the total repair costs were right under 12 grand. So I'll talk about that a little bit. That was pretty much all 4 furnaces and 2 water heaters is pretty much the majority of that. So, and that also includes 2 grand, which I estimated I'll spend later on some repairs to the roof. Nothing major, but so here's where we get to kind of the post, the refinancing. You know, I guess I found out what the appraiser came in at, 120K last Wednesday, I think, and I was really hoping for 130. You know, it's not the end of the world. I bought it for 90, so, but it's 7K in cash out refinance for delayed financing. So I was like, talking to my lender, and I was like, well, what comps did they use? Because one of these other properties is like almost identical, sold for like 130 last September. And they're like, well, they used this property, and this property. And I was like, all right, well, let me check the comps my realtor sent me, or my agent. And I was like, all right, well, I've got this address, and it's sold for 129.9. He's like, okay, well, the appraiser has that same property, but they have it for 120. And so I was like, okay, well, I really hope they screwed up and not my agent. So he was like, all right, I'll get with your agent, we'll look at it, we'll get the MLS stuff and figure out what's going on. So turns out the appraiser goofed, I guess. So currently I'm challenging the appraisal. We'll see what happens. But I'm hoping they raise it. So my mortgage is going to be a delayed financing, so I can pull out 70% of my purchase price. So that's all I can get. Then my fees are $3,300, including the appraisal costs. So before and after pictures, I don't really have a lot. I didn't really do too much actual rehab other than some of the CapEx stuff. So this right here was kind of a pleasant surprise for me. I'll call it beginner's luck. This was my first property, actually. So I went in and walked through after we had the initial contract agreed to, and you know, everything looked good except this one. I was like, man, that living room looks really bad. And I was like, I'm gonna have to replace the flooring or something. Well, come to the final walkthrough on the day of closing, I'm walking through and I'm like, what the hell happened in this unit? You know, because when I went through prior for the initial walkthrough, the guy walking through was the current property manager. He's like, oh yeah, they're gonna put new carpet in here. And I was like, no, they're not. They've already agreed to sell it as is. They're not. Why would they do that? So, you know, I go in the day of closing and I was like, oh my goodness, I can't believe they did this. And he was like, I told you. And I was like, why did they do that? And he's like, oh, the person who lives in the unit did that. And I was like, all right, cool. So I've got at least one good tenant, I think. So, but moving on. So this is a picture of the back of the property. There's a whole bunch of like weird junk. Again, you can't really see that it's all gone because of the snow, but that all got removed. You can see the gutters like hanging there, so we replaced the downspout of that. I want to replace the top of the gutter stuff, but I'm probably going to wait until it's a little warmer, just because I don't think many people want to get on a roof with snow. And those are really all the before and after pictures I have. Again, I didn't really do much interior remodeling. So here's all my expenses and final figures. I won't go through all of them, but you know, the main things I'm planning on budgeting for is, you know, vacancy. I'm just assuming all the units will be empty for 1 month every year. I really hope not. That would suck, but it's in the budget. 10% management fee. I got Property Boss. I'm sure a lot of you know about her, and I'm pretty happy so far. 5% on just miscellaneous and 10% on CapEx. That 10% might be high since I just replaced all the furnaces and half the water heaters, but if I come out ahead, then cool. Then of course I'm paying for water and the other stuff. So just the final expenses all summed up. I'm hoping to be making around $5.5 grand a year in positive cash flow. So maybe more, maybe less, but we'll see. And then as far as my cash return, it's really variable with the appraisal. So, you know, I was hoping to find out today if they came back with something, but no word yet. So, you know, if I get the 130 or the 129.5, it'll be about a 34.5% cash on cash return. If it comes out low, it'll be 24. I'm happy with both, but obviously 10% more would be ideal. So my key takeaways, especially because this is my first property, I would not recommend closing at the beginning of the month when the property is occupied. I thought it would be great. You know, they're like, oh, we're closing on the 5th. You know, it's going to be kind of tough for us to collect the rents and then prorate them prior to closing. So you can just collect all the rents. And I was like, perfect. You know, I'll get more money. And then come to find out, you know, you collect 2 of the rents easy, and then the 3rd rent, because only 3 of the units were occupied when I purchased it, you know, the guy's telling Property Boss, like, I already paid my rent to someone. And she's like, okay, well, who'd you pay it to? And he's like, I don't know. I already paid it, though. And she's like, well, can you prove it? And he's like, yeah, I'll work on it. You know, and then like 10 days later, she's like, hey, I'm giving this guy a fair quit, like, he either blocked my number, or he's not answering my calls, and I was like, all right, I'm really diving in, like, head first, you know, like, we're already evicting someone, it's my first property, not even a month in, and around this time was when they were replacing the water heaters, and, you know, it's all galvanized pipes, so of course after they replace the water heaters, there's like shower head clogs up with scale, and oh, all of a sudden, hey, my hot water's not working, I've resurfaced. Come to find out, he paid the previous property, no, sorry, he thought he paid the listing agent his January rent. And so we're like calling him, and he's like, I don't have any idea what you're talking about. And so we're like, all right, well, we're getting somewhere. So eventually we find out he paid the previous property manager his January rent. The guy said he wasn't going to collect it, so we're trying to get with him and, you know, get those $600. And, you know, eventually he just starts kind of slow playing it, and it's $600, so are you going to sue him? You know, go through the hassle and maybe come out $200 ahead. And so I started I had to go between the property manager, you know, my agent as a buyer, the listing agent, and so I talked to my agent. He's like, all right, I'll talk to the listing agent. And he came back and said, the listing agent said he would take care of it. So he did. I was really happy about that. We got the money, but you know, I got January rent like February 1st or something like that. So kind of a hassle. Ideally, if I had to do it again, I would close on like the 25th and just let them prorate it, have time to kind of establish property management so that things are a little smoother going forward. My next key takeaway as a beginner, real stupid, I trusted the pro forma on the insurance cost. They had $720 as the insurance cost. I think it actually came out to be about double. But you know, when I first started shopping around, you know, I called Geico first because I have all my other stuff with them, and they're like, "Yeah, we can do $5 grand a year for insurance." And I was like, "Oh my god, I've made a huge mistake." And so I was like, "This can't be." So I started shopping around, and I was like, "Okay, it's not that bad, but it's definitely not $700. So just don't do that." I don't know why I did it. And then my other one is everything doesn't happen overnight. You know, I was, you know, talking to property boss Kara, and I was like, "All right, like, when are we gonna do this? When are we gonna do that?" And she's like, you haven't even closed on this property yet. We can't do any of this yet." And I'm like, "Oh, right, okay." So I guess just kind of have to be a little patient, even if you want everything done immediately. I don't know. That was very tough for me because I was like really antsy to get everything done. And then again, everything is negotiable. I talked about that just with going back and forth on the pricing and stuff like that. So, and then get your own comps prior to the appraisal. I talked about that a little already, but so those are my big takeaways and learnings. I learned a lot of other miscellaneous stuff, but those are probably the biggest ones that I'll take going forward. So,
Any questions? First deal, that's a big one. I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Your CapEx expense is at 10%. Standard calculators have it at 5%. Why did you double it?
I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm engineer personality, but I'm very risk averse. So actually, when I was doing my calculations, I had another 10% in there for capital PMs or something, and I was, you know, now I'm like, why would I do that? But so when I was originally analyzing it, I was like, oh, this is going to be a good deal, and then it turned out to be a better deal. So long story short, better safe than sorry. I'd rather shoot low and be pleasantly surprised.
No, I thought maybe you had done it intentionally, but it's actually good that you did it that way. Anyone have any idea why on that property doubling his CapEx was a good idea?
Age.
Yeah.
How much renovation did you do when you bought it?
Pretty much none,
Yeah,
as far as,
so-
you know, aesthetics go.
Capital expenses, that 10%, it's not your repair and maintenance when someone moves out. Like, I had a rental today, she called me, hey, my furnace isn't working, sends a repair guy there, $100. You know, that goes under repair and maintenance. Capital expenses are gonna be your big ones, your roof, your furnaces, water heaters, windows, big stuff like that. Now, he had to do the furnaces right away, but it has old windows, it has a flat roof that, is that okay? And that was,
The roof is good, and what I was talking about for budgeting $2 grand, I really hope it's less, but I need to redo the upper part of the gutters, and a lot of the flashing around the roof needs to be shored up, and then some of the masonry needs repair.
yeah. So as he holds on to this property, because it's like a 100-year-old property, his capital expenses are probably gonna be higher than someone who buys a property, completely renovates it, and then rents it out because they've already spent all that money up front. So whether that was intentional or not intentional, doubling that and saving that for when something big happens is a really smart thing to do on a 4-unit. So, any other questions?
Most of my banks around me are taping me at 20 years, and that's kind of a tipping point. Did you use a local bank to get 30 years out?
So again, just lazy beginner. If y'all were here, I think in August or October, probably not August, probably October, one of the lenders who was here, Brian at Fairway, I went to him. He probably spent like 5 hours talking me through, that's a little exaggerated, probably like 2 hours just talking me through the whole lending process, and I was like, I'll go with you. I'll probably shop around next time and see what what I can get, but, I kind of have a little loyalty to him on that.
Are yours commercial loans or residential?
Well, if anything that I'm gonna rent, it seems like my banker wants 20 years and that's it, you don't go to 30.
Are you keeping that in your personal name or an LLC?
Just personal right now.
Okay.
Yeah, I really don't know. He was pretty chill with 30 years. There weren't really any questions asked.
There's a lot of folks in here that refinance their rentals. And 30 is fairly normal for them, so you may want to reach out to a few after. And
What's your next purchase? Goal. Another 4 unit? bigger?
Oh,
Money?
yeah. So I've been thinking about that, and I guess it really depends on what's available, what makes sense. I would love to purchase like a 20 unit and be pretty much done for the rest of the year, but that might be a little big of an endeavor for number 2. So there's one property I'm interested in for a next purchase, but we'll see what happens. So
why are you looking at me?
no reason in particular, just
Okay. I think he saw my whiteboard. Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
And if you are brave enough to face the firing squad and want to give that presentation, and again, it doesn't have to be beautiful, email me at group@investnwi. We'll put you into the schedule. It's simple, a couple of slides, 5 to 8 minutes, and then some Q&A. Again, it can be something you've done really, really well on. We've done some flips where we didn't make nearly as much, but what we learned from that is worth more than the money that we made. So, all right, now we're going to bring up our guest speaker, and I'm really excited about our guest speaker tonight. On our Facebook page, email, I get asked questions all the time that are legal questions, and I preface it, I'm not an attorney, but so tonight we're fortunate to have an attorney. And we won't make any bad attorney jokes, but there's lots of attorneys, and the reason why I contacted Attorney Petersen about this is because he also is an investor, so he can relate to us, he understands the issues that we're dealing with tenants and buying and all that. So if you want to give a warm welcome for Attorney Petersen. Thank you.
Okay, I'm Jonathan Petersen. I am an attorney. One of my primary focus areas is real estate law. And yes, I am not just the guy that evicts the bad tenants, I have them. I recently had to evict a bad tenant myself, so I feel the pain. Actually, I wanted to start with a joke before we get into the presentation. Real estate investor comes into his attorney's office and he says to the attorney, he tells his attorney, I got a problem. I just sold this house and I'm getting sued. And the attorney says, well, okay, tell me what happened. And the investor says, well, I went to my real estate broker, and this is a great real estate broker. He listed this as a maintenance-free property, and it sold the next day, sight unseen. So the attorney says, well, okay, I don't get it. Why are you being sued? Well, I haven't done any maintenance on the property in 10 years. All right, so that's with that being said, let's get right into it. Okay, I have 25 years of real estate experience. I'm a property owner, a landlord. I'm a former real estate broker, former contractor. Aha, and a dog leg. Okay, this is my intern having some fun. So that is the joke. I've assisted hundreds of investors, over 3,000 evictions litigated in the last 10 years. Okay, I'm just finishing up a book on Indiana eviction law. It is coming, I am hopeful to have it to the publisher by the end of the month, although that might slip a week or so. And again, according to my employees, the citizen, okay. Okay, so Adrian asked me to talk tonight about various things that investors run into. And he said he wanted me to focus on lease gotchas. So I guess we'll get into that. I'll welcome questions as we go, or we can hold them to the end. Basically, I'll take this presentation in whatever direction the group wants me to take it, so that's fine. So let's talk about it. What's the first and most important thing that most people want from their tenants? They want the rent to be paid, right? Okay. So let's talk about getting the rent paid. Now, before I get any further, I will mention that on my website, and there'll be a website link or address at the end here, I sell real estate forms. I sell leases and I sell other forms. And I'll be candid, I'm not looking to make money. The cost of these documents really covers my website. The reason I do this is that when clients come to me to fix their problems, generally the problems start because of the documents that they've been using. I can't tell you how many times I've had some client bring me a homebrew lease that he got from a stationery store and then did his own little thing with it, or her thing with it. And that creates the problem. So I'm showing you some of the language that we have in our leases, and I want to talk about it a little bit, why this is important. Now, first things first, I don't like grace periods in leases. I don't understand why they're there. And we're going to talk a little bit about how, I'm going to explain the talk that I think every landlord should give to their tenants. You're running a business here. Your tenant is not your buddy. Your tenant is not your friend. Your tenant is a customer client, and you want one thing from your tenant. Well, there's a couple of things you want, but the primary thing that you want from that tenant is pay the flipping rent on time. Now, we're not renting to kids. We're renting to adults. So, if a person can't figure this stuff out, giving them a 5 or 10 day grace period isn't going to help. So, I find myself that when you give grace periods, it creates confusion, and if a tenant is inclined not to pay the rent, that's just one more excuse not to pay it. So the rent's due on the 1st. Now, the other thing in here is where you pay the rent, okay? How many, I want to see a show of hands. How many people have at least one rental unit? Okay. How many people have 5 rental units? How many people have 10 or more rental units? Okay. 25. All right. How many people personally collect the rent? Okay. How many people have their tenants deposit the rent into a bank account? How many people have the tenants mail the rent to them? All right, not a lot. How many people don't like giving out their mailing address to their tenants? Okay, that's a few. All right, so in my opinion, the only way to collect rent safely is to have the tenant mail it to you. And there's legal reasons for this as well, but I'm going to start out by saying that, okay? I want to point something else out. See this sentence here, the time of each and every payment of rent is of the essence in this lease. That is an important sentence that's in a lease. Now, I have no illusions here to think that everybody's going to race out and buy my lease, which I have designed over the last 10 years to have every advantage for a landlord in it. But if you're going to use your own lease, make sure you have this sentence in, okay? Because if you don't have it and you are not exactly precise on insisting that the tenant pay rent on time, I've had a scenario happen where the tenant was able to argue because of the type of lease that was being used, that timely payment of rent wasn't a material term of the lease. Of course it is. But the judge bought it, and it's because you don't have things like this in there. Okay. So let's move on. Now, I have this sentence in my lease. Why is that? Because I actually ran into a case one time. And I think it was the same case where the tenant was having some traction persuading the judge about the timeliness of payment of rent. So, this is the sentence that I have in my lease if you rent to a tenant mid-month. Now, I think rent should always be due on the first of the month. And there's no legal reason for it, but I think there's a very practical reason for it, which is when you start getting to 10 or 25 units, you don't want to be wondering whose rent is due when. It makes it much easier for you if everybody's rent is due one time each month. Make it the first day of the month. Now, there is a legal reason for it. We're going to talk a little bit about this when it comes to doing evictions and notice requirements in the state of Indiana. But suffice it to say, just about every lease I've ever run into says rent is paid at the beginning of the period for that month. Well, make it the first of the month, okay? And you put this phrase in, and that gets you through that first month if you're renting them on the 10th or whatnot. You just prorate it. Whatever the rent is, divide it by number of days in the month, and then multiply it by the number of days remaining in the month, okay? All right. Now, late fees. How many people charge late fees in their lease? Okay. All right. How much is your late fee?
$20 on a 6-day per day.
Per day. Okay, so in theory, we're talking $200, $400, $500 in late fees? How much is your rent?
$950.
$950. So the late fee is 55% of the rent if they don't pay for a full month. Okay. Anybody else?
$50.
$50. Anything else? Okay, how much is the rent?
$1,100.
One more.
50 and then $3 a day after that. I think $3.
Okay, so we've got $50, $500, and yours is 75, 125?
Yeah,
Something like that?
yeah.
50, 125, and 500. Who thinks that the $50 late fee is legally permissible? Okay. What's that?
Up to a percentage.
I'll get to that. How about the 125?
Oh.
How about the 500? Okay. All right. What? People are saying no. Why? Why are you saying no? I heard you.
It just seems like a lot.
Seems like a lot. Okay.
I would think that there'd be a cap on it.
Okay. You're in. Okay. You see, you guys, you don't need to be a lawyer to do this stuff. You got it. Right? All right. Your common sense is going to be your best friend. You've been doing this for a while. I mean, I'll be candid. Being a landlord can be easy if you allow it to be. And one of the things I want you to take out of this today is your good common sense is going to be your best friend. Listen to it. Okay? So, late fees. This is the late fee that I use in my lease. Okay? Now, I have tried to calculate this out in a way that gets the most amount of late fees that I think you can potentially get. All right, so here's the law. And I'm just going to read it. A valid late fee in a lease is intended to compensate the landlord for both the administrative expense and inconvenience in collecting late rent and the loss of use of rental income. Such a late fee may also coincidentally serve as an incentive for the tenant to pay rent on a timely basis. Thus, to some extent, every late fee amounts to a penalty for those tenants who fail to pay their rent in a timely manner. However, when a late fee provision is so substantial and burdensome as to compel compliance with the terms of the lease, rather than to compensate the landlord for the actual damages likely to result from the breach, the provision is not compensatory but punitive and is unenforceable as a liquidated damages clause. Okay, so what are late fees? Late fees are liquidated damages, quote unquote. Well, what is liquidated damages? Liquidated damages are negotiated damages that a landlord enters into with a tenant. And you see liquidated damages in all sorts of contracts. But in this case, it's a landlord and tenant. And it is a way to come up with a number to compensate the landlord for very difficult to quantify damages that the landlord incurs when the tenant pays late. Well, what are those damages? Well, when any time I go to court, if I've ever done an eviction for one of you, and I have to prove up late fees and damages, I'm going to start questioning my client on the stand. You know, we're going through the list of damages here, and I'm going to say, okay, so the tenant was late. What happens when the tenant is late? Do you have to call them? Oh yeah, I got to call them. I call them all the time. Do you have to send them letters? Oh yeah, I got to send them letters. Hey, pay me, pay me. Did you jump in your car to see if he's still living there? Yeah, I had to do that. He's still there, and he gave me a song and dance, blah, blah, blah. That's the kind of stuff. I mean, how do you quantify that? Well, that's what late fees are for. So, the $50, that's, I think you could justify that to a judge. That compensates that. The $125, because of how you've staggered it, I think you could probably sell a judge on that. The $500, I'm sorry, it's not, the case law is pretty clear. That is going to be construed as a penalty. I think you can look at it in terms somewhere in the range, if you're getting over 25% of the rent, you're probably getting into dangerous territory. And in fact, if you look at my late fees, you see how I stagger this? First, your late past the first is $25. That's the letter and the phone call that my secretary does. At the 20th, that's somebody jumping in the car and going out to the house. Okay. And the total of this is $200. Well, most of the rents that I see people charging nowadays are $800 and up. So there you go, right? Now, the lease that I have, if you decide to buy it, I don't have any here today. You're going to fill out a form, and then we're going to email this to you. Because some of this stuff needs to be filled in. The last time I sold leases at a speech like this, half the people I sold them to used the very lease I sold to them, and then they were calling the office weeks and months later, hey, I used the lease, can I get another one? So we're just going to email it to you this time. You guys have it, okay? All right. Okay, so now, remember we were talking about how you pay the rent? Now, part of this speech is me scaring the bejesus out of you, so I'm going to scare people right now. For the people that have their tenants depositing the rent in their bank accounts, I want you to think about this. You have given your tenant the account number, right? Now, how do you debit a bank account? You need the account number and the routing number. How difficult do you think it is to get a routing number? Anybody got a smartphone? Google First Midwest routing number and see how long it takes that to pop up. Boom, instantly, okay? You give somebody your bank account, and in 30 seconds they can have the routing number, and if they're clever enough, they can be writing checks on your bank account that evening. Why would you do that to yourself? Okay? All right, that's one thing. Now, another thing is, when a tenant makes a deposit into a bank account for rent, how do you know it was that tenant making that deposit for that rent? How do you prove that? I've actually litigated that, and that's a tough one. Okay. For the people that go and collect rent, okay, again, let's make being a landlord easy, guys. I mean, one property, I guess, you know, you want to take a drive, get out of the house, your spouse is driving you crazy. I get it. But what's the gotcha there? What's the gotcha? If you haven't shown up to collect the rent, then the tenant doesn't have to tender. So the tenant hasn't paid. So here's what I see happens. And let me tell you, some of the craziest evictions I've ever done start with, lease says landlord picks up rent. Okay? The landlord is on a treadmill. He's like a rat in that thing that's spinning. Because he goes, tenant's not there. He texts, be here at 11 o'clock tomorrow. Landlord shows up 11 o'clock tomorrow. Tenant's not there again. Okay? And then when we're in eviction court, the tenant's telling the judge, hey, he never showed up. Okay? Now, the reason that you pay, that the best way to receive rent is to have a tenant mail it to you, there's a number of reasons. First and foremost is, you are required in your lease to give the address of your property manager and the address of the owner for service of legal process, okay? That's a statutory requirement. So if you're required to give this stuff, then have a tenant mail it to this one, or, you know, if they're the same people, have them mail it to this, okay? But what are the other advantages? Well, one advantage is you're not chasing your tail, okay? And you're not giving some crook an opportunity to clean your bank account out, okay? Number two, now it puts the burden of paying rent squarely on where it should be, on the tenant. If the tenant doesn't tender, when we go to court to evict them, the first thing the judge is going to say is, well, where's your proof of payment? You ever cancel a check? You know, the answer is always no. Or, here it is, Your Honor. You know, right there as we're sitting. Check's in his hand. Okay, he didn't pay, you know, evict you. And then the last thing for you to think about is this. If the tenant's paying by a personal check, and they bounce that check, they've committed a fraud. Okay? And what that means is in addition to them not paying your rent, you now can bring suit on that bad check and get treble damages and attorney's fees on that alone as a separate cause of action. And one better. Let's say that the tenant later files bankruptcy to avoid paying you on your judgment. Well, you know what you do? You pick up the phone and say, hey, Jonathan, knucklehead just filed bankruptcy, go get him. And that's exactly what I do, because if they bounce a check, that is a criminal act, and if you act on it promptly, you can get that check declared non-dischargeable. And now you can collect on that bankruptcy, you can collect on that bad check, that treble damages bad check that you got from that tenant. I am presently doing that for at least 3 clients. Okay? So, I hope people reconsider this notion of putting it in your bank account. Yes?
If you are kind of worried to put like your home address there, can you use a P.O. box?
I don't see why not. Yeah. But here's the thing. The law says that the tenant has to tender, okay, the law, and then there's the reality of eviction. Okay. The law says that the tenant, as long as the landlord is located in the state of Indiana, the tenant has an affirmative duty to track down the landlord and make payment to the landlord. And in fact, if you fail to give this information in your lease, there's a statutory provision that allows the tenant to seek out that information, and any expenses they incurred, they can recover that from you plus legal fees. Okay? So there's a compelling reason for you to put this information in there. Okay? I don't think you'd ever get to that far that there would be a question about a P.O. box. The thing about a P.O. box is you have to be prepared to accept service at the P.O. box. So if somebody sends you something by certified mail, you have to be prepared to sign for it. Okay? I have clients, oh, they sent it by certified mail, I told them no. No, they'll get you otherwise, okay? And it can be more expensive that way. So be prepared to sign for it. But yes, P.O. box is a good way of doing it. You can go to the post office or UPS. UPS stores are great, okay? Because they're like pseudo offices and they got the P.O. boxes in the back. And they'll sign for and accept stuff. And I think they'll even call you when you receive things. Does anybody know that?
Yeah, they'll call you or email you.
They'll email you?
Yeah.
Okay, so that way, that's one better than the post office box, is you'll get an email saying, hey, you got something in, and that way you're not having to go there every day to check. Okay, all right, any other questions? Yes?
I would add, we switched ours to, we get a scan of all our mailings emailed to us at the post office, so we know when the rent check is actually received.
Oh, really?
It's actually gone to our local post office for delivery.
Okay.
So before we even get it at the residence, we do get a.
When did the post office start doing that?
I honestly just signed up for it, and I know when the rent's.
Did everybody hear
at
that?
the post office.
Post office will scan the mail that comes in and email that information.
No charge for that.
That's great. All right. Yes?
Yeah, what's your position in regards to either property management companies or those that know about ACHs? Are ACHs, like, I don't know, do you have a position one way or another on using ACH, and is the law transferable for the check you were talking about for a bad check to an ACH?
Well, if a check bounces, yes, okay? As long as we have a check number and a routing number, and it bounces, yes, and then you give them the 10-day notice to cure, and if they blow that off, then you go get them, okay? So, my understanding is that an ACH is sort of like when they take almost equivalent of taking a photo of the check and then processing. So functionally, it's the same thing as them issuing a check, which is a negotiable instrument. That's the technical term. And if that's bad, then the remedies flow from that. Okay, yes?
You had mentioned about the bank account. We had set up, they had to do a quick pay, so they just have to have the last 4 digits of my phone number, so they don't have a bank account number. When you put,
Well,
like,
again,
so is that still
The
not a good
problem
idea?
is how do you source what payment from who?
Because he's the only one that I have on that account, and I have that account just for that rent.
All right, well, again, I think these deposit type transactions are fraught with, can be fraught with problems. Now, on an individual basis, it could be that some of the concerns I've raised are not relevant for you. You know, I'd have to evaluate it on a case-by-case basis.
I have a question about the mailing it. We had a lot of problems with mailing. It's in the mail, it's lost in the mail. They would get a money order and mail a money order and it's lost. So I'm like, they're out the money because they've already saved it. So we've had it like in 1 year, 2 were lost. I'm like, so we got to the point, we collect first, so they drive it to my house and give me the money order instead of a check.
Hang on, I'm gonna do this now. We're gonna come back. Okay. There are 2 hats for being a landlord, okay? If you want to distill being a landlord down to its most purest essence, it's this. And it boils down to who has possession of the keys, okay? Before you turn over the keys, you're wearing the blue hat. After you turn over the keys, you're wearing the white hat, okay? I want you to just think about this, because people come to me later and say, blue hat, white hat. All right, blue hat. Your sole job is to find a good tenant, okay? Somebody that gets it. Now, you're going to be my prospective tenant, okay? So I'm going to give you the chat. This is the talk. Mike, you and I are going to get along great. You know why? Because right now, as you're signing this lease, we're going to both understand what we expect from each other, okay? So this is what you can expect from me. When you have an issue in the house, I'm going to promptly fix it for you, okay? All right? But this is what I need from you. I'm not over at your house. I don't know what's going on. So you got to call me when something happens. So if the toilet's been leaking, and it started leaking Monday, and you to wait until 5 o'clock on Friday to call me, well, guess what? The plumber's not getting there until Monday or Tuesday next week, okay? But if you call me Monday when the toilet starts leaking, I'll get right on it. Is that reasonable? Okay. Now this is what I expect from you. Rent's due on the 1st, okay? And I expect to be paid. And I'm not going to chase you for it, all right? Now here's what I'll do. Life happens, and I'll work with you, so long as you call me. So if something's coming up and maybe you're a little short, as long as we're in agreement that the rent's got to be paid in full every month, I'll work with you, generally, as long as this doesn't become the usual deal, okay? Is that fair?
Sounds reasonable.
Okay, now one last thing. If you don't pay the rent, it's not personal, it's business, and I'm going to evict you, okay? Anything about what we just covered that you have a problem? Here's the keys. Here's the keys. Welcome your new home. Okay? How tough is that, guys? Can we all do
You
that?
don't want my deposit first month's rent?
Well, yeah. Sure. Good point. Okay. right. And that's a good point. You want all that before you turn on. All right. Blue hat. You just find a good tenant, okay? And now, how do you go about doing that? All right. 30 years ago, there used to be credit reporting agencies around Lake County. There was one that I remember my dad used to use, and you pull credit reports. Well, nowadays, that's nearly impossible. You've got to be set up with somebody to do that for you. So, what's the functional equivalent of a credit report? And everybody in this room has access to it right now, and it's great. Anybody.
Court dockets.
Right there. Court docket. You get on the Lake County Clerk's website, okay? And you get on the online docket, and you put the person's name in. All right? And here's what you're looking for, in my opinion. You're looking for, have they ever been evicted? And it comes up in the case descriptor, eviction. Okay? If they've ever been evicted, next. Because if they're going to flake out once, they'll flake out again. Right?
What is the website?
The Lake County Clerk's website. Lake County, Indiana Clerk.
It's LakeCountyIndiana.org.
That's it. LakeCountyIndiana.org.
Porter County got the same thing.
All counties do.
I don't know.
Porter County is part of the bigger one, the big state one.
Okay, it's the Odyssey system. In fact, Lake County's going to the Odyssey system. All right? And I think they're going in June, as a matter of fact. You can look that information up. There will be a case descriptor on there. And you just look. Eviction, aha, next. Okay? Very straightforward. As good as a credit report. I don't care about medical bills. I don't care about your AT&T bill. I don't care if you've had your car repoed. If you've been evicted, I'm not renting to you. Okay? And the one time I violated the rule, guess what? I ended up evicting her. So, there you go. Yes?
Why don't you care about medical bills?
Because it's the priorities in life. People got to keep a roof over their head and their family. And I like people that are going to prioritize paying rent over things like paying the medical bills.
But won't they go after them? Go
Sure.
after them with judgments and stuff? But
Yeah, possibly. But again, we're talking about the what ifs. Again, if they've been evicted, that's a great determinant. In my opinion, that's an indicator that they could likely put themselves in a position where you have to evict. Again, these are my opinions. You may want a more stringent review of their case history, and if that's the case, if that's what you want, that's fine. Okay. All right, let's move on then. White hat. Turn the keys over. What is your role now? Anyway. Cost management. Right? You're managing your costs. Because the tenant's taking care of the revenue, so all you're doing is keeping an eye on the costs. Well, what are costs? Fixing the roof, fixing the windows, paying the water bill maybe, unless the tenant's responsible, but then that leads to the most critical thing, which is keeping an eye on the tenant and figuring out if and when the tenant's going to go bad. Right? That's a cost. So how do you keep an eye on that? Well, rent's due on the 1st. When are they paying? Have you had history of them being late on the payments? Things like that. It reaches a point where you have to look at the overall picture of the tenant. Maybe the tenant's been historically late for a few months. I mean, we've had these scenarios, right? The tenants start getting late, and you start thinking, uh-oh, and we're coming up to the end of the year, and Christmas is coming up, right? We know how this story plays out, huh? Okay? And it's October, I might just put them out. Thinking, better to get them out now and try and find a good tenant now than having to do this in January. Cost maintenance, right? Okay, so the two hats. All right, so go back to where we were. Okay. Okay. Adrian, how are we doing on time?
You're good, got about 35 more minutes.
Okay. All right. Required language. All right, now here's something that's in here. This alone is why you should buy my lease, okay? This is the order of payment that, the order at which you can apply payments. Now, you see this language here? Who would ever come up with that on their own? Right? Okay, there's a reason for that, which is, and we'll get to this later when we talk about things that can happen, such as the bankruptcy trustee. Okay, common mistakes. Trading rent for repairs. Who does this? Good. That's a good thing that nobody's raising their hand. This always goes bad. The craziest evictions that I have ever had start with landlord picks up the rent, and then I discover later, oh, the tenant was supposed to do yakety yakety yada yada and fix this and that and the other, and he didn't, and now I'm evicted. Okay, guys, let me tell you something. Number one, if you're going to hire him to do it, treat him the same way you treat a contractor. Have him give you a contract, okay, and you pay him. Pay him like you would anybody else, okay? But part of the reason this goes bad is because when you're trading rent for work, the tenant living there always thinks that he's doing the gold standard in repairs. And the reality is it's terrible. Okay, right? It's always terrible. And now you're fighting over not only the amount of rent, but the quality of work. Just don't do it. Don't do it. Okay? And this is a rule. I've broken a lot of the rules that I speak of tonight, but this is a rule I've never broken because I have been persuaded by the misery of others why it's such a good rule to keep. Okay? All right. Trustee avoidance matter. Now, here's another one why you insist that the rent gets paid in full every month. This actually happened to an unfortunate client of mine. And this particular client had a streak of bad luck with bankruptcies. She got banged 3 times in a row on stuff like this. And it was all unique. Okay, but this is the one I think for purposes of tonight that was most eye-catching. Here's the legend, okay? You see this? You've got January, they collected some money, that was for the November rent. And in January they collected some money for December, and then February they collected for December and January, and so on and so forth, okay? What does that mean? She's now a creditor of this knucklehead, okay? Whereas, remember that goofy language I had in my lease about contemporaneous exchange? When the tenant's paying you on the 1st, and they get to stay in the property for the rest of the month, you're not a creditor under those circumstances. They're paying you in advance for the right to stay in the property. But here, this particular landlord became a creditor by allowing the tenant to get behind and trying to baby the tenant along. Okay? And you don't have to do that. Everybody knows that we can evict tenants in Indiana in 2 weeks, right? Anybody not know that? 2 weeks. Okay, here's the letter that this unfortunate got from Daniel Freeland, one of the trustees, and he's one of the more rapacious ones, that coming out, and he forced her to turn over the $3,000 in past due rent. Boy, that's like rubbing salt into the wound, right? Guys, if they get behind more than a couple weeks, evict them. This isn't rocket science. You gave them the talk. If they don't get it, sometimes I'll give them a call like, hey, we talked about this. The rent's due. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, okay. You're going to get it to me today, or am I evicting? Okay? Because I know I can have you out before the end of the month. There you go. And if you have to do that call more than a couple of times, get rid of them. There's plenty of good people out there that will pay the rent on time. Okay. Condition of the premises. We hope that doesn't happen, right? Okay. Now, this is the language in my lease, and here is where we get the intersection of language that may or may not be enforceable in the law. Okay? Now, there is no reason why you can't insist that the tenant, give it back to me the same way I got it to you. Now, what's the legal standard? The legal standard is the tenant must return the property to the landlord in as good a condition as received, less reasonable wear and tear. And reasonable wear and tear is one of those, less reasonable wear and tear, that's a term that only attorneys can love, because there's no fixed standard to it, all right? It's a function of how long they've been there, and various other things such as the condition of the property, etc. Okay, so I put this in here. Hey, tenant, remember this? Part of the talk, because we go through the lease together, and I say, you see this? And I've actually had judges look at this and laugh and say, didn't you read this? Okay, it's one of those things that goes. You have to remember this. Anytime you're involved in a legal setting, it's about credibility. The most credible party generally wins, unless they're asserting, crazy claims. So it's credibility. So we put this in here. Hey, tenant, give it back to me the way I gave it to you. That helps move the needle more in your favor when it comes to conditions. And then I put things in here like tenant to maintain exterior, required equipment. Hey, tenant, you're renting a house. You need a lawnmower, a vacuum cleaner, a plunger, and a toolbox. Hello. Okay? It makes it so much easier when it comes time to prove up damages to say, hey, Your Honor, the grass was this tall, and I made a point. They're supposed to have a lawnmower. Oh, yeah. Boom. And you get your money. Okay? All right. Condition of premises. So here we go. This is the common law, accepting reasonable wear and tear. Now we're going to talk a little bit about charging tenant security deposits. Okay? So let's talk a little bit about what is outside the scope of reasonable wear and tear. Okay. It's clear that a bunch of holes in the walls for paintings and pictures, that's unreasonable. You can recover from that. It is clear that dirt and dust, so if you have to go in there and really scrub the place down, that's recoverable, okay? And there's well-established case law on that. And then, the obvious stuff. Hey, there's a big hole in the wall, the window's broken, urine on the carpeting, animal stains and stuff like that, okay? Now, where does it get a little catchy or dicey? Well, okay, they've only been there a year, and you're trying to replace all the carpeting, and it's not obvious that the carpeting is destroyed, okay? If you're going to try to go for that one, we need really good evidence. You need photos. So, one of the things that I want everybody to do from now on, all right, before we do that, does everybody have a mobile phone? Yes? Hold them up. Hold up your phones, people. Everybody. Okay, very good. Everybody has a camera on their phone, right?
Yep.
You know what you're going to do with this. All right? As you are walking a tenant through, click, 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 click. You're going to take photos before. And then when we're done, click, 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 click. Okay, now we've got documentary evidence. All right, and really, I'm telling you this from a selfish reason, because if I have to do the eviction for you, it's so much easier for me proving up the damages when you give me the before and after photos. Otherwise, my job gets a lot more complicated. I can do it, but the photos are so great. Okay? So, condition of premises. Photos are great. We've talked a little bit about damages. Did I do something? Okay, there we go. Performing tenant duties. Now this is something that not a lot of landlords are aware of, and this is great. All right, now everybody should be using a lease that says if I have to evict you or do anything that you're supposed to be doing, I can recover my legal fees, right? Some people use these homebrew leases and it doesn't have basic language like that in it. All right? This is a way to get yourself fixed. And here we go. Keeping the premises reasonably clean. These are tenant duties, okay? Use the stuff in reasonable fashion. Now here's a big one. How many times have you had a tenant move out and they turn the NIPSCO off the microsecond they're out the door and it's the middle of winter? Anybody ever had that? We've all had that, yeah. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about NIPSCO reversion letters in a moment, but the tenant has a duty to ensure that they don't disconnect the heat, and that causes a rupture of pipes and things like that. There's an implied duty there. I know that's not going to be much in the way of satisfying when you're cleaning up the big mess, but at least you've got something to think of, okay? Refrain from defacing, blah, blah, blah. Okay.
What's the timeline on that? Because the tenant's not going to keep the electricity on for the landlord indefinitely.
Good question. Everybody hear that? What's the timeline? So answer only an attorney can know. A reasonable timeline. And that's measured by the circumstances of the case. So under the circumstances, when you know a tenant's moving out, if you know they're moving out, you need to move quickly. If they pull one of these midnight runs on you, okay, and you're not aware of it, well, then you've got a reasonable period of time to find out about it, okay? And, okay, and here's the tenant duties. Now, here's the buildup, okay? Enforcement of obligations. You can recover all of your damages and attorney's fees for doing all this stuff, okay? And the tenant has been given a reasonable amount of time to remedy the non-compliance. So, you know, they do this. They turn the electric off and you're not aware of it. You're given a reasonable amount of time to discover that and address it. Okay. Security deposits. Boy, I have had some anguish in my office about security deposits over the years. So let's talk about it. Okay. Everybody is aware, right? And I'm not going to call anybody out, because I want to protect the guilty. Everybody is aware that when a tenant moves out, you have to account for the security deposit. And you have 45 days from when the lease is terminated, the tenant moves out, and the tenant gives you the forwarding address in writing. Right? Well, forwarding address in writing is when you know their forwarding address. So, here is a form that I have created to help landlords comply with that. Okay? Here's the ledger. Put all this information in, all the stuff you're charging against security deposit right there. And then here's the letter, and I've designed it in the alternative depending on whether there's a lease and whether they're getting any money back and whatnot. And you fill this out and you send it to them, okay? And then you send it by first-class mail and certified mail. And why do you do that? Well, first-class mail will get forwarded to them. Certified mail will be signed for, and if they're not there, it'll get returned to you, okay, with, in theory, the forwarding address on it. So now you know their new address, okay? If you don't do this, yikes, okay? The landlord who fails to comply with this noticing requirement is liable to the tenant in an amount equal to the part of the deposit withheld and reasonable attorney's fees. And there's another provision in here which we didn't put in, which says, hey, if you don't send that to them in 45 days, there's a presumption that there's no damages. So you just waived all your damage claims. All you can go after now is unpaid rent. There are attorneys in Lake County that send their kids to college on this stuff. I know one of them who is in court all the time suing landlords on this stuff. Please don't be one of those landlords, okay? Stay on top of this, guys. Ouch. It's an expensive goof up. All right. Okay, now, let's talk about holdover of tenants for a moment. Yes?
Just on the slide before, so say for example, like you're renting an apartment and you move out and the person you're renting it from is like, hey man, the floor is all crappy, like, I'm keeping your security deposit. Can you ignore them for 45 days, and if they never send you a letter, sue them after the fact?
Who's you, the tenant?
Like, if I was a tenant, yeah.
Ignore them. You mean not give them a forwarding address?
No, like, you know, you give them a forwarding address, and maybe they don't know what they're doing, and so they, like, you say, hey, here's my forwarding address, I need the security deposit back, and they're like, well, you're not getting it back because, in my opinion,
The landlord
you
says
crashed
that,
this
yeah.
place. But they never email you anything.
Ouch, landlord just got jammed.
Okay.
In fact, I just wrapped up one of those on behalf of a client not too long ago, and that's exactly what happened. The tenant was kind of a lowlife, but he went to college with a guy that was an attorney, and he moved out, and that's exactly what happened. He trashed the place, and then they must have gone out for beer or something like that, and the attorney buddy said, well, let's go have some fun. So he went and gave his forwarding address to the landlord, and the landlord kind of laughed like, are you nuts? He waited 45 days, then he gets sued, and then I get called, okay? By the way, I'm much better solving problems on the front end than the back end, okay? At that point, I basically was the bearer of bad news. I said, you know, client, you're gonna lose. Give him his security deposit back and give this other attorney, whatever, $500 or $750 or something like that. And, you know, again, at the end of the day, this is real estate. If you're not knocked out of the game, it's a learning experience. And like anything in life, I mean, when you go to school, it costs money. Real estate's a lot about learning. You're going to be learning a lot as you go. And hopefully the cost of the education is not that expensive. Okay.
So is that every state, or is that just Indiana? 45 days?
The 3 states I'm licensed in, Indiana, Illinois, and Florida. Illinois, yes. Indiana, absolutely yes. Florida, I'll know when I retire and practice law down in Florida. I can't answer that. Yes?
If you have a property manager, who retains your security deposit? Property manager, or does it send it to you when you sign a lease?
Whoever you tell. There is no holding requirement in Indiana. Unlike Illinois, there is no requirement you hold the security deposit in an interest-bearing account. There's no requirement that you hold it in a segregated account. You just have to account for it when they move out. So, I personally, you know, if I had a property manager, I don't know. I mean, to each his own. I know some property managers will hold it, and they'll hold it in their trust account. Great. You may want to hold it. Whatever makes sense for you.
Well, I have one that gives me and one holds it. Then when the people leave, I got to bug them to get it from him.
Well, okay. I mean,
yeah.
I want to revisit. I mean, in either case it works. And if the property manager will know this stuff, and if they cause the problem, then, you know, they're the ones liable, right? Okay. Moving on. Holdover. And Adrian, what, are we about 15 minutes? Or?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Holding over. Tenant, I write leases for a fixed period of time. When that time period is up, I make a decision whether I keep the tenant or not. Why? Because I don't absolutely need to renew the lease. Because if I accept rent after the tenant moves out, they become a holdover tenant, and if I wrote the lease for a year or more, that lease renews for a year. Most people think it renews on a month-to-month basis. It's only true if it's less than a year. Now, are you going to go into court and say, Your Honor, Jonathan Petersen said it renews for a year? Okay. The eviction judges and the small claims court judges are likely going to say month to month. If you really want to press the issue, there are some judges that would appreciate this, and I can give you the case law. But at the end of the day, what it means is your lease continues in effect. If you accept rent after the tenant moves out, all the benefits that you obtain for yourself from your lease are retained in place. And of course, you can come in and up the rent. You can come in and give them a new lease, all that. But if you don't, you still have a tenant in your property under the same terms and conditions of your prior lease. And that's good, because a lease contains more language than just you pay rent every month. There's other things in there that give you benefits. And you want to have those. Okay, so this explains all this about the holdover and things of that nature. And I'm going to kind of move past that. Okay, notice of default. How many people here are from Illinois? All right. Everybody knows in Illinois, if you can evict a tenant, you got to give, for non-payment of rent, you got to give them a 5-day notice, right? Okay. That is a jurisdictional requirement in Illinois. If you fail to give the 5-day notice and you file the eviction, your case will be dismissed. Jurisdiction. Here in Indiana, we have a 10-day notice requirement with a huge exception that I will get to in a moment. Okay? First of all, the 10-day notice requirement in Indiana is not jurisdictional, it is procedural, meaning that if the tenant doesn't raise it as an impediment to your eviction, it's waived, so don't worry about it. Furthermore, every lease that I've ever dealt with says the rent's paid at the beginning of the month for the month, okay? How many people have leases that say, you can live here for the month of February and the rent's due on the 28th? Anybody? Rent's due in arrears? Okay, well, way back when, in the 1800s, when most leases were for farmland, that's the way it worked. You rent farmland out, and the tenant pays the landlord after they harvest the crops. Rent is paid in arrears. You got to give a 10-day notice in that scenario. Nowadays, you don't have to give a 10-day notice. Now, to make it much clearer, have a written lease. No questions about that. Okay. The other thing is, make sure you got a jury waiver in your lease, okay? It gets crazy. The crazy evictions that I've been involved in start with, they collect rent, they're trading rent for work, and then the tenant starts doing stuff like, I want a jury. Well, just waive out of it, okay? So make sure you got a jury waiver in your lease. Okay, we're moving on to buying a house. Okay, everybody knows about the NIPSCO thing, right? If NIPSCO's been off for more than 90 days and you want to get it turned back on, you got to go get the house re-inspected, right? Okay, I'll just gloss over that. Okay, tax. I'm going to veer off for a moment and talk about sheriff's sale. Anybody buy property at sheriff's sale? Okay. Now, you guys that are buying at a sheriff's sale, do you do an inspection of title? Yes? No?
Self-inspection.
Self-inspection. How do you do a self-inspection?
Same way title company would.
He asked me.
Okay, well, we all understand when you buy at a sheriff's sale, the quality of title that you obtain is based on the priority of the lien that's foreclosing. Okay? So I had a scenario happen not too long ago where I had a client come in and he bought a property at a sheriff's sale. He bought a townhome that was subject to an HOA lien, and he didn't pay real close attention to who was the foreclosing lien. Turns out that the mortgage was foreclosing, and then the HOA started to foreclose on the lien. And then after twists and turns, the primary mortgage dismissed their case, the HOA lien remained in play, and they took the property to sheriff's sale. And when my client bid at sheriff's sale, he took title subject to the first mortgage, which had refiled their case and had a sheriff's sale 2 months later. Yikes. Okay? Now, there's a happy ending to this story. There was some big surpluses that were created in both sales, and I was able to successfully, through some legal stratagems, I was able to successfully claim the surpluses for the client and help minimize his damage. So, the key thing that you guys have to remember is you have to check who's foreclosing. Don't buy when the HOA is foreclosing, okay? All right. Tax sale. Here's one that gets fun. you buy a property at sheriff's sale or tax sale, and the person that used to own it is still living there. Now what do you do? Right? Okay, well, there's a group of investors out there that say, well, I go to the owner and I cut him a deal or something like that. Well, you got to be careful about this. And this goes beyond the scope of the presentation today. But there's a whole body of law that talks about you dealing with the former owner and offering to sell the house back to them. And there's a bunch of pitfalls for you there. So be very careful. More to the point, most of the time when I get involved, it's because the client just wants to get these guys out. And again, these are some crazy evictions as well. There's two ways you can do it. You can go back to the sheriff's sale or the tax sale and get what's called a writ of assistance. Anybody ever heard of that? Okay. You can get it, but it takes forever. Or you can call me and I can get them out in 2 weeks. But be prepared that it's going to be crazy. I think one of the best things that you can do is you can go to the owner and introduce yourself and humanize the situation, and maybe even offer cash for keys, which generally will be rejected. But if you do that, in my observation, the occupant will be less likely to trash the place on the way out and direct their angst elsewhere. That's been my experience with this. Okay, now.
What's a good offer for cash for keys?
As little as they'll take. Yes?
What's an eviction cost?
$4.95. And there's paperwork, well, it's at the end of the presentation. Okay, tax sale. Here is one that creates all kinds of agony. I deal with one of these every year. You're buying something at tax sale. Again, Lake County Assessor's website, love it. Type in the address, and there's this thing called a GIS map. Everybody heard of that?
Yeah.
Okay. It's the overlay map, like this. Now, you're going to look up the parcel you're buying. You want to make sure you're buying the one with the house on it, not the one that has the vacant land, okay? Now, here's the problem. In Lake County, particularly in the northern communities, I don't know, this is some old tale that's been bandied around for years. I don't know if it's true or not. But supposedly, when you had township assessors, they were compensated by the number of taxable parcels. So there was no desire to consolidate parcels. And when they subdivided land way back when, it was always these 25-foot lots, and you could never build a house on that. So there would always be all of Lot 3 and the south half of Lot 4, and that gave you 37.5 feet frontage, blah, blah, blah. Well, they never consolidated those two parcels, so each of them are taxable. And when they expose them for tax sale, they'll sell them. They're supposed to sell them serially, and they're supposed to announce at the tax sale that there's a joint parcel here. How often do they do that? Never. Okay? So you got to do your homework yourself. Otherwise, you'll end up with a half a parcel or something like that. Okay? Little tax sale gotcha here. Okay. And if you don't think it happens, here is the attorney that did the closing. These poor unfortunates bought a house that had been sold at tax sale. And half of the house got sold. And when they started getting the notices, the attorney sent a letter to the other attorney who was sending out the notices saying, stop sending the notices to my client. You're bothering them. Well, needless to say, boom, that was bad. Ended up with a title claim, and yeah. So make sure you do your homework on tax sales. Okay, problems with the city. Let's talk about a couple of cities and problems that you can have. I think I got 5 minutes, so I'm going to speed this up. Okay, East Chicago. This is a classic one. You're evicting, and guess what? The tenant calls the city and says, you're a slumlord, and out comes the inspector and you get the letter. Okay, what do you do? Anybody?
Don't let them in.
All right, we'll get to that. That's later. What do you do? Okay, well, you want cheap. The cheapest solution is call the inspector and say, okay, I'm evicting the tenant, and I'll take care of all this. Nothing wrong with that. And then when he's done, take care of all that stuff, okay? Happens frequently, and like a lot of things in life, it's not what happens to you that matters, it's how you handle it. So in this case, you call the guy and tell him you're going to fix it, and generally that'll be good. Okay, now, Hammond. Here we go. Unsafe building. Who said don't let him in?
I said that.
Okay, good man. Now, Hammond runs around, and now, they're not doing it so much anymore, but they used to be running around and sending out letters to all the landlords saying, we want in your property. We want to see how many units you have. Because in the bad old days, particularly in central Hammond, you'd have these guys, these old huge Victorian houses, and they chop them up, and next thing you know, there's 20 rental apartments in these things, right? So Hammond was on a tear to get rid of these. And what they would do is they would send these demand letters saying, let us in, by the hair of our chinny chin chin. And what is the right way to handle this? Well, you know if you let these guys in, they're not there to do you any favors, okay? Unlike the situation when you're evicting and you get the letter, I mean, that all makes sense, right? I'm evicting, I'm going to show this landlord. Here you get this random letter. So, and what do? Well, in my opinion, throw it away, okay? The city cannot come in and force their way in your property. Why? Fourth Amendment, okay? Now you hear it, you know, if anybody watches Law and Order, you hear Fourth Amendment criminal context. Fourth Amendment applies in a civil context. So you call your tenant and say, hey, if you get a call from a city inspector, please don't let them in, call me. All right, and if they keep harassing you, you call me. I've been looking for one of these cases. This is a great constitutional law case. And if it goes, it won't cost you anything. No, because I recover all my attorney's fees from the city. Okay, all right. Lastly, this is, oh, that got cut off. Okay.
To go back to that, what if the tenant lets them in, even though they instruct the tenant not to?
Well, okay. Stupid does is stupid.
Yeah.
Or whatever. And you can only do what you can do.
And they can make
If they let them in, the Fourth Amendment claim fails. So, you know, that's why you have the chat with your tenants, you're in good relations with them, and you say, hey, don't let them in. You know? I mean, if you think about it, hopefully your tenants are working during the day, so they're not going to be around anyways. So it's not an issue, right? Okay. All right. Moving on, Whiting, you know, not picking on these communities in any particular order, but these are the ones where I had interesting things come out of. Okay, City of Whiting. Anybody ever get one of these?
You've got a nuisance, because we've had to send the police out a dozen times. So, you landlord fix it.
That's a bunch of BS, okay? It's an unconstitutional, arbitrary application of an ordinance, all right? Yeah, the city's not happy that you got a bad tenant and that they've had to go out there a bunch of times, but that's not grounds for citing the landlord, okay? That is an arbitrary, capricious application of a discretionary power. It's unconstitutional. Now, at the end of the day, I don't want you to come out of this and think, oh boy, I got a lawsuit. Now, you know, the old maxim, you can't fight City Hall, is true because it costs money to do things like this. I understand that. But what I want you to understand is that you can push back a little bit on some of these things, the Hammond and the Whiting examples. But at the same time, you're back to managing costs, and you can reach out to the tenants and say, hey tenants, I'm having trouble, you know, help me with this, okay? In one instance, hey tenant, if somebody shows up, let me know, don't let them in. In the other case, hey, listen, stop doing whatever you're doing, or else this isn't going to work. I mean, everybody's got a ripcord in their leases, right? If you don't behave, I'll give you a 10-day notice and you're gone. You want one. Okay, my lease has that one. All right. Problems with utilities. I love that. Right. Water coming out of it. Now, we all know about NIPSCO reversion letters. Have you guys covered this in other chats? Okay. So, in the good old days, you used to have a letter. Hey NIPSCO, I own this address. And if the tenant cancels the NIPSCO, put in my name. All right, nowadays, there's a form, landlord-tenant relationship form by NIPSCO. You can get it off their website or call me, I'd be happy to send it to you. And you just send it in. Now you gotta remember, if you ever sell the house, you gotta send NIPSCO a cancellation, okay? And even then, that doesn't do it. I had a house in a reversion from '98, and I canceled it like in 2003, and they reverted it back to my name last year. And that was fun, dealing with NIPSCO, telling them, you know, hey, why are you doing this? But this is great because invariably, sooner or later, if you're doing this long enough, you're going to have some knucklehead tenant do a midnight run in the middle of the winter, and you don't want the pipes to freeze, right? Okay, so NIPSCO is. All right, problems with tenants. I think Conrad was the intern that was doing this. He was just having fun with tenants. Okay, we had the two hats. We've already talked about that. Okay, so lastly, we all know that tenants belong to an Indian tribe, right? The Sosumi tribe? Okay, so just remember, at the end of the day, expecting that you're going to be able to have the tenant be reasonable when they've been unreasonable and, you know, pay you and whatnot, it's not going to happen. You're going to end up having salt, which leads to this. When you realize that the tenant's not working anymore, you want to do the eviction, $4.95 flat fee, 2-week turnaround. My office does collection work too, which is unusual for most attorneys around here. We'll actually chase them. Let's be reasonable though. If you're a victim because they have no money, because they got no job, I'm not going to be able to squeeze money out of somebody that doesn't have a job. But we can start, we can put in the pipeline, and if they do get another job, we can start giving money. Okay? Now Conrad's being funny. Okay, and here's one of the websites. This is easy to remember. www.indianaeviction.com. Okay, so I think that was an hour.
We're good.
Do we want to open up to questions? Yes.
Do you only collect on cases you file, or you collect on other cases as well? And what's your cost if you do?
Possibly. I would consider, we do collections on other cases.
So you possibly charge me too?
Of course. In general, here's how we do it. We charge an upfront fee, and then after that fee, and then you recover either. Typically, we'll charge anywhere from $275 to $495 in advance.
For collection?
Well, it depends on where we are in the case. If you have a judgment, it's going to be less. And you get the first $500 or $900, 100% of it you get back. And then after that, it's a third. The split is a third, 2/3. Okay? Any other question?
Let's say you have a land contract as opposed to the normal rental lease. You're selling a property over 5-6 year term, 7-year term. Any advice on what to put in the contract as far as what court that might be tried in? Would that ever be eligible to be tried in the court of evictions if they defaulted, or?
Adrian, you want to go for another hour?
Just give the normal response. It depends.
Quick answer. And I toyed with putting this in this presentation, but a land contract is a special beast that generally you cannot bring into eviction court. Okay, and as a result, it takes longer to put people out that are on a land contract, and there can be other heartache that goes along. There is no quick and fast answer to that question, unfortunately.
One more question. This will be a lot quicker. As far as the tax sale goes, let's say you have a tenant that ends up wanting to rent from you for a couple of years, and then after a couple of years of good payment, they want to buy it back. Is there a limit of time it can pass and you can sell it back?
On tax sales, I am not aware of the same types of restrictions that exist with sheriff's sales.
Okay.
Type situation.
Gotcha.
So I see this on Facebook groups all the time, where someone in like the 219 rent pages will be like, my landlord sucks, the furnace is out, the blah, blah, blah. And everyone's response, because everyone on Facebook's an attorney, is don't pay rent. So in what situations can tenants withhold rent for major repairs?
You can't.
Okay.
It's in the end. Payment of rent is independent covenant. If the tenant withholds rent, if they think they're gonna go on a rent strike, you got it. It's easy. As soon as I hear that you're behind in rent, there's really only a couple of defenses that are viable. Number one, I did pay, here's my proof. Or, number two, the property, I was constructively evicted, but you can't assert constructive eviction if you're still living there. So at the end of the day, if the tenant's still living there and they're not paying you rent, getting the eviction is very straightforward. Yes?
You cover the whole state? You cover the whole state?
Just Lake County. Yes?
Is that a question? And I don't hear a lot of, talking about this, is in a lease, can you put in a clause in the lease requiring a tenant to have renter's insurance which would cover their damage to the house if it's significant?
Yes.
And I didn't, okay, can you enforce that?
Yes.
Okay, because that's in the case in point, if things happen, maybe it don't happen to anybody else in the world. But I had a tenant, who was out one year, and comes home, parks the car in the driveway next to the house, goes in the house, the car catches on fire in the driveway, and so does the house. And I had insurance for the house, but I also had $1,000 deductible, which I'm out, even though the insurance is secure in the house. So,
Assert a claim against the tenant's renter's insurance. Tenant caused
but
it.
they didn't have renter's insurance, and this was before.
How about their car?
Oh, they got the car, right? But-
They'll assert a claim against the
Auto
vehicle.
policy.
Auto policy.
Okay.
Fire started there.
As a reminder, everybody in the back, I've got forms. If you want to buy my lease forms, it's on there. There's a discount tonight. Fill it out, put your credit card number on that. We'll process it tomorrow. We'll email all the forms in tomorrow. Yes?
Are you in Will County or Cook County in Illinois?
No, we don't do eviction. Yes?
It's kind of the legal rules on if tenant just disappears in the middle of the night but leaves personal property there.
Good question. Are they paid in rent or not?
Just say they disappear and the rent stops coming in.
Okay. If the rent stops coming in and you are in a, if they fail to pay rent for the rental period that you're in, and they're just gone. In broad strokes, and this is something, again, you consult with your attorney on this one, but in broad strokes, if it would appear to an objective any person that the tenant has abandoned the property, then you can go in and repossess it. This is one of those where it's fact sensitive, so you've got to be very careful about this. It boils down to common sense determinants. So I always say, look, if the big screen TV's gone, the bed is gone, and there's no clothes in the closet, and they haven't paid rent, that's probably a good indicator that it's gone. If the big screen TV is still there, and those other things are there, now you're in, now it's a dicey scenario.
Do you not have that 60 days where you, or 90 days that you have to hold their property in storage until, that was what we were always told, and I was like, I know, I was
I
like.
just recently litigated that, and I got that eliminated in one of the Crown Point courts. Okay, I told you my book is coming out in May. The book talks about that, but in broad strokes, Indiana has 2 chapters of eviction law. The one chapter that deals with evictions stemming from changes of ownership or when title's in dispute, that provision applies. Classical landlord-tenant evictions, that provision does not apply. Okay? Try something new.
Just had a question. Is there, what is the law requirement as far as doing inspections on properties? How do you have to give a tenant a certain amount of notice in order to come to do an inspection?
What does your lease say?
It goes back to this.
What is your lease? If your lease has a requirement, follow your lease. Otherwise, reasonable period of time, reasonable notice.
You can put in there that you are allowed to inspect it at any reasonable hour, correct?
Yes, but I think you gotta give them notice. I mean, there's a tension here. I am litigating a case right now where a client came in to a property with a young lady and the prosecutor's office got involved and it's ugly. So, reasonable notice, folks. Letting yourself in. And the other thing is...
Not letting yourself, but coming and saying, I'm here.
If you've got an emergency situation where you've got to let yourself in, there should be no less than 2 people involved as well. Okay?
Just for the sake of time, if you have any additional questions, you can contact Attorney Petersen. He has cards out back, or I'm sure he'll hang around another 5 minutes.
Sure.
After he answers a few more.
I think there's still a sandwich there waiting for me.
Yeah.
Any cookies too?
One or the other. All right.
Awesome. Well, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone have any deals tonight? Check out this clicker. Perfect. Anyone have any wholesale houses? Anyone looking for funding? Any contractors looking for work? No? Awesome. Anyone gonna put an offer on a house in the next 30 days? Yeah, let's do that. Let's have some good news next month.
I got a couple.
Couple what?
I got a couple. If I have any single family renters or landlords, I've got a property in East Chicago. It's a 2-bedroom, 1 bath, going for $35. It's currently rented for $700. I got a short sale in Calumet City, getting 2-bedroom, 1 bath, going to subject to lender approval, but list price is $30.
Awesome. Any other deals? Cool. Let's get something done this coming month. Next month, we are meeting, it's also on the 19th, we're going to be back here, and we are going to continue the rental theme. And our guest speaker, I don't remember how many he's bought, but in like the last 2 years, he's bought, I don't know, like a dozen houses. And what he does is he pays cash for them because you have more buying power when you have a cash offer versus a financed offer. He will rehab it. Then he'll rent it out, then he refinances it, and when he refinances it, he gets out most of his money. And then with that money that he just got out, he can go around and put it back into another property. So this has allowed him to snowball how many properties he's been able to buy. So he's going to talk about that process and some of the pros and cons about all of that. So if you have rentals and you want to really build that portfolio up, you definitely want to come next month. And again, we'll be back here. Real quick on the membership, if you were first time here, it's free. If you want to come back next month, it's $10. We do have annual membership options. They're $90 for an individual. If you have a spouse or a business partner, you can pay $135. That's for both of you. And again, that gives you access, once we get the website up, that's going to give you access to all of the videos. It's going to give you access to the contact list, the vendor information, and all that stuff. If you have any questions about that, you can reach out to me. Tracy in the back can help you out. If Tracy's the one who checked you in. Or you can email us at group@investnwi.com. And again, we meet on the third Monday of every month, 6:30 to 8:30, and we're going to be here until we outgrow this space. So thanks for coming. We have this room till about 10, so feel free to talk to people, finish up the food and coffee and cookies, and network and pass some business cards.
Shut this off.
This is my wife.